you at 81? I did it.
That, that's why I tell people my age. I want people to be inspired to love themselves.
Well, thank you for joining us today.
Yes.
I really appreciate you taking the time out and just sharing some of your wisdom with us today.
I'm happy to do that. Thank you.
So I'm going to get straight into it because I know we've got time, but every time I think we have time, we run out of time. So
I know what that's like.
I'm not sure where I want to start with this because there's so many questions that I have, and since I put your profile up on the Mind Body Soul Festival, I've been getting questions coming in from all sorts of people from around the world about your processes. Now, you've been at this for quite a long time.
A long time, yes.
and I've honed a process to help with something called inner bonding. Tell us about inner bonding and what is it?
Inner bonding is a really incredible 6-step pathway to learning to love yourself, to learning to take emotional responsibility, physical responsibility on all levels. It's a process that teaches people how to connect with who they really are and their soul and learn from their feelings, to unearth the false beliefs that are limiting them and to connect with a higher source of love and truth and guidance and wisdom. So it's a mind, body, spirit process. And when people follow the steps, they actually change their brain. They develop new neural pathways in the brain for what we call the loving adult, the higher functioning, the part of us that can actually take loving action for ourselves and know what to take, because few of us had role models of taking loving care of ourselves, especially emotionally. People don't learn how to take care of their feelings at all.
Right.
And so they learn that in this process.
That's fantastic. And how did you decide that this is something you wanted to do? I mean, people don't wake up in the morning and go, oh, I'm going to help people with inner bonding today. How did you get to that process?
Well, I came from a dysfunctional family, like so many people. And when I was 5, my mother took me to a psychiatrist, and she was a raging narcissist. And so, of course, I was an anxious kid. And he said to me, tell your mother not to yell at you. And I very clearly remember thinking, I'm only 5 years old. You tell her, and because she's not going to listen to me. And my next thought was, I can do a better job than you. And that's when I decided to be a psychologist. And so then I practiced traditional psychotherapy for 17 years. I'd had a ton of my own therapy. I wasn't happy with mine. I wasn't happy with what I was doing with others. I started to pray for a process or a teacher or something that would really work fast and deep, that people could learn to do on their own. And that's when I met Dr. Erica Chopich. She had half of inner bonding. I had half of inner bonding. Spirit came in, put it together for us. It's really a process that got downloaded from our higher guidance. And so that was 37 years ago.
Wow.
And I've been practicing that all this time. And it's just been completely life-changing for me and for the tens of thousands of clients that I've worked with this process.
So love is a big word for some people, and they find that really difficult in either loving yourself or others, and in relationships. How does this process help relationships?
Well, what so many people don't realize, I mean, people have heard you got to love yourself before you can love others, but they don't know what that means, because most people think of loving themselves as, oh, I'll take a hot bath or get my nails done. So much of inner bonding is about learning to take emotional responsibility. When we're not taking emotional responsibility, what's happening is the opposite. We're abandoning ourselves. And that leaves us, and I can talk about the major ways that we abandon ourselves, but that leaves us feeling very empty and alone inside. And when we feel that way, then we pull on other people. We try and control them to give us what we're not giving to ourselves. And we tend to attract people at our common level of self-love or our common level of self-abandonment. So when we're abandoning ourselves, we're going to attract people who are also abandoning themselves. They're going to expect us to fill them. We're going to expect them to fill us. We're going to expect them to love us so that we'll have self-worth. They're going to expect the same thing. And of course, this is not something we can do for each other. We have to do this for ourselves. We can support each other in that, and that's wonderful. But if I'm abandoning myself, and let me just say the four major ways, which is judging oneself, turning to addictions to numb out our feelings rather than learn from them and take care of them, making others responsible for them, and staying up in our head, which is a way to avoid feeling our feelings. If we're doing these things, then of course we're abandoning ourselves, and then expecting somebody else to love us and give us what only we can give ourselves. And even if they do, if we're judging ourselves, if we're ignoring ourselves, it's not going to go in. If we're telling ourselves that we don't have any worth, or we're no good, or that we can control others and it's others' responsibility, then everything that other people give us is going to bounce off of us because of this self-abandonment. So for relationships to work, each person needs to be learning to take emotional responsibility so that they can come to each other full of love to share. So many people go into relationships to get love and having no understanding that relationships are really about sharing love. And they don't know how to do that because of the self-abandonment. So when we're in a relationship to get love, we're going to be very, very disappointed. But when we're loving ourselves and we're in the relationship to share love, then we can experience what I think is the best experience in life, the sharing of love.
That's wonderful to hear. In fact, one of our questions from one of our listeners here was what is self-abandonment, and defining that for him, because they felt that it was about respecting yourself. Would you say respecting yourself and self-abandonment goes hand in hand?
Well, not respecting yourself is a form of self-abandonment, but the problem is that you can tell yourself that you respect yourself. But let's say a child comes to you upset, and instead of attending and listening and learning and caring, you give the child a cookie and put him in front of the TV.
When
He
I
may feel, yeah, he's going to feel, yeah, he'll feel okay for the moment, but in the long run, he's going to feel rejected.
Right.
And so we can tell ourselves that we respect ourselves. We can look in the mirror and say, oh, I respect you. But if we're ignoring our feelings, if we don't know how to take them and learn what they're telling us and learn how to manage what I call the existential painful feelings of life, the grief, the heartbreak, the helplessness over others, if we don't know how to do that, then it doesn't matter how much we tell ourselves we respect ourselves. We're not actually respecting ourselves when we're not taking responsibility for our feelings.
So having feelings can sometimes contradict how someone reacts and behaves, and the whole idea of self-abandonment is something that most people, would you say most people have? And why is it so important to love yourself at that point?
Okay. So if you think about how most people are raised, most people, even if their parents loved them, they were abandoning themselves. They were caretakers. They were takers. They overdrank. They oversmoked. They overate. They overworked. They turned to many, many addictions. And so most of us did not see role models for people actually being with their feelings, learning from them, embracing them, and learning to take loving action for themselves. And so I mean, if you look at your families, even though the parents might have been loving to you, they may have been distant from each other. One might have been a caretaker, the other a taker. I mean, the role modeling is not very good
Right.
for relationships. And so if we want to have health and well-being, first of all, abandoning ourselves causes a lot of stress in the body. And as we all know, stress causes a lot of illness. And so by abandoning ourselves, we are exacerbating any tendencies towards illness. People abandon themselves physically by eating junk food, not getting enough sleep, not getting exercise. And so if we're not loving ourselves on these levels, we're creating a lot of stress and we're making it absolutely impossible to have loving relationships. So learning to love ourselves is absolutely vital for healing addictions, because we turn to addictions to fill up the emptiness from abandoning ourselves. And so it's absolutely essential for health, for well-being, for vitality, for loving relationships, for healing on all levels.
One of the big questions that I get sent to me regularly is about suicides and how people are left feeling a giant hole in themselves from the fact that they've experienced a suicide in the family. How do you heal from something like that?
Suicide or any loss, or any of the very painful things that happen in life that create painful feelings, is what most people have never learned how to manage, because everything that we've learned to do to numb out our feelings, we learned to do as children to avoid these very, very painful feelings that we couldn't manage. So now, when, let's say, somebody loses somebody to suicide or COVID or whatever, the loss is very, very painful. There's going to be loneliness. There's going to be grief. There's going to be heartbreak. There's going to be helplessness, deep helplessness. Somebody commits suicide. What people need to learn to do is to connect with a higher source of love and comfort. We cannot manage these feelings alone. None of us can. And so this is one of the things that happens with inner bonding, is that we learn to access this higher source of love and comfort. We learn to bring it inside. We learn to bring love and compassion and comfort and caring inside to these very, very painful feelings. And what happens when we learn to do that is that each time we do it, they move through us. I mean, things like grief, it comes over and over, it comes in waves. But if you ignore it, if you push it down, then it gets stuck in the body. And that's what can cause illness. But if each time they come up, we connect with our higher source of love and compassion, and we bring that down inside, we hold ourselves with that and also get held, because we're here, we have to be here for each other. And I mean, that's a big part of relationships, is being here for each other, being held by each other through times of grief. But many people have said, oh, I've got to be strong. I can't even ask to be held. I mean, this is what causes a lot of problems. So learning to hold oneself with compassion, learning to reach out for the comfort that we need is vital in terms of managing that kind of pain.
I've noticed you spoke about just earlier, and I'm just going to go back to that really quickly, was that you call on a higher self. What's the difference between calling on a higher self, the spirit, and the soul?
Well, so my experience of the soul is that it's very, very big. We have a very big soul, and a part of our soul is inside our body, which we can call our true self, our inner child, our feeling self. It's the part that often communicates through feelings. And the rest of our soul is all around us, and it communicates through thoughts or images, many ways, intuition, in many ways that it communicates. So my experience is that we all have, well, of course we all have a soul, but we all actually have many spirits helping us to deal with life. And that when we open to that, we receive love, we receive compassion, we receive guidance. I mean, I do this all day long. All day long, I'm saying, what's loving to me now? And I'm receiving guidance all day long about what's loving to me now. And this is one of the things we teach people to do, is how to connect. Most people have no idea. They might believe that they're spirit or God or whatever they want to call it, but they don't have a personal relationship with that higher aspect. And it's not that hard to create that. It's just that people have not learned how to do that.
And would you say asking the right questions to yourself is part of the process of learning how to do that? Asking quality questions, I should say.
Yes, that is part of the process, but connecting with our higher soul, our higher self, whatever you want to call it, is about our frequency. And because spirit exists at a higher frequency than we do, if it exists like we did, we could see it, it wouldn't be spirit, it would be embodied. And so, if we were like spirit, like a hummingbird's wings going really, really fast, we wouldn't see each other. So we have to raise the frequency of our energy in order to be able to access the higher frequency of spirit. And there are two major things that needs to happen for people to be able to do this. One is they need to keep their body clean, because if they're eating junk food, eating sugar, drinking a lot of coffee, alcohol, smoking cigarettes, all of that lowers the frequency of the body. And it makes it really hard to raise our frequency high enough to access our higher guidance. So they could be asking the questions, but if their frequency is that low, they're not going to get anything. The other thing has to do with intention. And in the inner bonding process, there's only two intentions. One is the intention to control, to control getting love and avoiding pain and feeling safe, which lowers the frequency. And the other is the intention to learn about loving yourself and sharing your love with others, which raises the frequency.
There's the secret sauce.
Yeah, it is. It's the secret sauce. Yeah, you're absolutely right. When I learned to open to learning about loving myself, I'd been eating really well for years, but I still couldn't have that access. But when I learned to truly open to learning about loving myself and sharing my love, that's when access opened for me. And at this point, with practice, I have what I call at will divine connection. I can connect anytime I want.
Well, I'm going to go to a question that somebody asked about the divine, and they said, do you feel that as the human race, we have lost our connection to the divine in the current situation that we're in the world right now?
Yes, I think many, many people have, and that's one of the problems. I mean, I think that more and more people are opening to that, but the problem is that when we abandon ourselves, when we disconnect, we lose touch with our soul, which is our love, our compassion. And then that ego part, what we call the wounded self, takes over. And that part of us is programmed with many, many, many false beliefs and can act out. That's the part that wants to control. And that part can act out in very controlling ways, as we see around the world with the despots around the world, control, and wreak havoc everywhere. I mean, we see it everywhere because that part of us that just wants to control, that thinks that's what makes us feel safe and that's what makes us feel powerful, has taken over. And so, yes, when that's happening, it means those people have completely lost touch with who they really are, with their divinity, with the fact that on the soul level, we're all one, that we harm others, we harm ourselves. Right. On the other side, I think more and more people are recognizing that we're one and are recognizing that we need to connect to that higher source, that source of love, and learn to love ourselves and others. And what I see has been going on for quite a while is there's a polarization, obviously, a polarization between those people who are truly much more devoted to love and those people that are devoted to power over others, to control. And that's happening big time right now on our planet.
And how's it going to play out? Because not everybody has access to something like inner bonding. Tell us, how can this help? For example, I live here in Zimbabwe right now, which has gone through an immense amount of changes recently with the last president who held power for 35 years. being very controlling, very manipulative, being very, wanting to do and feel and be the center of power in this country. The new president has currently inherited that legacy, if you want to call it that. And we've got a nation here which is trying to heal, but doesn't understand the process of healing. And so the ego, as you have mentioned before, has taken over. There's a lot of what can I get for me right now?
Right.
How do we help a nation heal from something like this?
See, you said maybe people don't have access to inner bonding, but everybody does. On our website, we have a free course. The books have been translated into many languages. Anybody can access this and learn it. They don't have to have money to do it. We have a tremendous amount of help on our website for people who want to learn it. And whether it's inner bonding or some other process,
Right.
people need to start to learn to take responsibility for their own feelings. I mean, that has to happen. If they're external, if they're, well, I got to just get for me, that's the control, that's the ego.
Yes.
If they're blaming and they're angry, that's the ego. But when we're looking at, okay, what can I do to start to see who I am, to value who I am intrinsically, to value my divine soul self,
Right.
and to bring love in and then share that. That's what changes the world.
Brilliant, because I'm going to go to another question that is very similarly related. And it says, my husband constantly sabotages me, my work, or the people that I'm close with. He would never take a course like this. How can I help him to help himself?
You see, that person needs to take her eyes off him and put them solely on herself in terms of how she can take care of herself in the face of whatever he does. Her focus is on changing him. That's a form of control. How can I help him help himself is a form of control. And anytime we focus on somebody else like that, they're likely to go into resistance. The moment she tries to help him, he's going to back up and say, leave me alone, and go into resistance. And so this person needs to go inside and learn how to help herself in the face of whatever sabotaging behavior he's doing. They're in a system. She's saying he's sabotaging, but in some way she's allowing it. And so when I work with one person, I mean, every relationship has a system. When one person changes the system has to change.
Right.
And so if I were working with her, I would just help her to go inside, to go internal instead of external, and learn how to take care of herself in the face of whatever he does. And that is going to change the system.
Right. I believe that truly. I've seen it in corporate when I've been working in corporate, and as you say, birds of a feather flock together, and misery loves company. You certainly bring and attract to you those people that almost want to keep you in that space, because
That's right.
That's what they feel they're most comfortable with you at. And the moment you change something, or you do some work on yourself, some personal development, or get some self-help and explore the world around you for what it is, you begin to change your frequency and your vibrations. And
That's right.
And that can have an adverse effect on the people that want you to stay as you are. How do you cope with something like that? Because the more you work on yourself, the more you realize that you've changed, but others around you haven't.
Yeah. So I say to people, like, let's say in a relationship where somebody says, yeah, but if I start to love myself, what's my husband or my wife going to do? And I say, well, it's a 50-50 deal. Either your relationship will get a lot better because your partner will see you happier and might say, Cha, what are you doing? I want to do what you're doing, and might be reacting totally differently. Or that partner might be angry that the system is changing. That's what happened for me. I was a caretaker, and just taking care of everybody, Mother Earth with everybody, but completely ignoring myself. And I got very ill. And I knew if I continued to do this, I was going to die. And so that's when inner bonding came in, fortunately. And I started to practice the process and realize I've got to learn to love myself, but I had to be willing to be hurt by the people around me. I had to be willing to lose them rather than continue to lose me. And in fact, that's what happened. I lost my 30-year marriage. My kids were angry. My parents disowned me. But I got my health, I got my vitality, I got my creativity, I got my ability to manifest my work. I mean, I got me back. So this is not easy to take the risk of shifting the system.
Right.
And, if you're in a work environment, you might need to be willing to leave that work environment. It's not easy to start to love yourself. But what are the consequences? I mean, for me, the consequence of not doing that would be that I would be dead. So I wasn't willing to go down that path. I was getting very ill. My immune system was shutting down. I knew I was headed for very serious illness. So I wasn't willing to go that route. And I had to become willing to take the risk of loving myself. I mean, we can't control what other people are going to do. That's one of the big things we have to accept. We don't have control over other people. And so I had to accept that this might happen. And it did. I was terrified that the people who said they loved me really didn't love me enough to support me in loving myself. And they didn't. And I had to deal with that. But looking back, I mean, I would do the same thing again, because here I am many years later, much, much older and extremely healthy, full of vitality, creativity. My work is soaring. And so it was worth it.
So there's obviously a connection between the mind and the body. In fact, one of the questions here is all about that. Carrying emotional baggage is obviously exhausting. Is there a physical connection between the mind and the body that inner bonding helps with?
Oh, absolutely. Because what inner bonding does, like I said, it creates the new neural pathways for what we call the loving adult. And the loving adult is the part of us that's open to learning and connected with our higher source. And when we're operating as a loving adult, we're in the present moment. See, the ego wound itself is past or future and creates a tremendous amount of stress. When we're ruminating about the past, we're worrying about the future, we're trying to control it. Stress, we're activating the stress response in the body, which shuts down the immune system and ultimately is one of the major causes of illness. It affects the vagus nerve, which moves us either into the parasympathetic, which is the calm, or the sympathetic nervous system, which is activated in fight or flight. The wound itself lives in the amygdala, the lower part of the brain. That's the ego, which activates fight or flight, which activates that stress response and creates so much illness. So when you practice inner bonding, and it takes time, this is not instant, but when you practice inner bonding and you develop your spiritually connected, open to learning, loving adult, you bring peace and calmness and presence into your body. And that's one of the things that has created so much health for me. So lots of times I like to tell people my age in order to inspire them, because they don't believe that people can be healthy. I'm 81 years old, going to be 82 soon. And
you not look your age at all.
I know. I'll tell you an interesting story about that. I tried to get a new passport. My passport was running out. I sent in 3 different photos and they said it's not enough detail, because they didn't believe that it was me. And I finally went to a passport office and I said, how old do I look? And she says, in your 50s.
Yeah.
And I said, well, that's the problem. They're not accepting my photo. So she wrote me a note and said, yeah, this is her. And they finally accepted it. But you see, that's what happens when you love yourself. And I don't have any of the illnesses that people my age have. I don't have arthritis. I don't have any of that. I have vibrant health, energy, vitality, creativity. And that's because of learning to love myself physically, emotionally, spiritually, and many other levels that we teach people about.
That's so awesome to hear. I'm going to go to another question because I feel that this is going to take us in another direction, but I also feel that it's something that I'd love to know more about too. And the question is, there's a lot of talk about conversion therapy for gay men, and this is practiced usually by churches in America. How does inner bonding help a gay person and their family?
Well, first of all, it's heartbreaking that anybody would think to do that, to change who a person is. But once again, with inner bonding, you learn to take care of the pain of this. You learn to really know who you are and to accept who you are, and to know that God, Spirit, this is how you were made. There's nothing wrong with you. And to move out of any kind of religious or cult or spiritual group or whatever that says there's something wrong with you, that you have to be changed.
Right, right. And I guess that's quite an important distinction, is knowing that you don't have to change to be loved.
The
Love.
the soul in us is a spark of the divine. How could there be anything wrong with that spark of the divine? We are each an individualized expression of the divine, and we are perfect within. But the part of us that doesn't know that is that ego programmed wounded self. Now, anybody in these religious organizations that think that somebody has to be changed, or they're completely out of touch with the divine. They're completely out of touch with who they are.
Yeah.
I mean, just because they're religious doesn't mean that they understand anything about what God or spirit or truth really is. And so it's up to us to learn to know who we are, who we truly are, and to value and honor that, and to just not be around people who don't.
Agreed. I totally agree with you. This work is immersive, and on your website, you categorically mention this unapologetically, which is great. So, why aren't more people doing the work? The Delphic Oracle says, "Know thyself, be thyself." What are the blocks most people face when trying to heal themselves with inner bonding?
Yeah, so the ego wounded self is very devoted to control.
Right.
And it will say to you, look, I've gotten you this far. You're alive. You're not crazy. Rely on me. And the last thing the ego wants is for us to open to being guided by a higher source. And so it will resist in any way it can. It will come up with all kinds of false beliefs about all the bad things, like, oh, if you love yourself, you're going to end up alone. Or if you start to do inner bonding, you're going to find out terrible things about yourself. Or, I mean, these are just so many beliefs that we have. And that ego wounded self will come forth with all of them to try and stop you from opening, because this is the battle. It's being played out on the planet between love and control. And it gets played out within ourselves, because that ego wants to control and isn't going to give it up easily. But what I have found with inner bonding is that when I persisted in practicing it anyway, even though my wounded self was telling me all these bad things that were going to happen, eventually that part of me got that as a loving adult, I keep us much safer, because I'm connected to a higher source that keeps me safe. And eventually that part of me kind of let go. I don't hear from that part very often.
How long did it take you? Because that's one of the things that people feel doing any form of self-help and healing, that it's going to take me too long. It's a process. I've got to wait until, I only start things on a Monday. So I only can, I'll start it next Monday, or I'll start it next month, or I'll start it next year. When's a good time?
Yeah, well, a good time is now, of course, but the wound itself will always tell you it's going to take too long. That would be like you have a baby and the wound itself says, well, how long is it going to be before this baby grows up? Or how long is it going to be before you're a good parent? I mean, it's a process.
The process.
And this is a process. I see it as a lifetime process. When people practice it, they start to feel better right away if they're really practicing it. But it's going to evolve and evolve our whole lives. I'm still learning, I'm still growing, been doing this for so long, but to me, it's a great privilege to be on this path of learning and growth. So the wounded self will ask, how long?
Yeah.
The loving adult does not ask that. The loving adult says, oh, it's time to start learning to love myself, period. Not how long does it take?
Yeah. Fair enough. Fair enough. Success comes with strings. How do you heal from the outside in when the world around us is experiencing COVID-19 and for many people, the healing process is being dictated to them? How do we heal others that bring the anxiety, the blame, and the emptiness and aloneness to our doorstep?
Yeah, so that's like the question about the women who, how can I help my husband? We do not, the best way of helping others is to be a role model.
Right.
The more we go in, not out, the more we go in to learn to love ourselves and bring joy and vitality and health to ourselves, the more we influence other people. So again, I want to encourage people who ask that question, take your eyes off others, learn to take care of yourself in the face of whatever it is they do, and become a role model of personal responsibility for your happiness, your pain, your health, your well-being.
And that's the state of grace we should all be striving for. Dr. Margret, thank you so much for everything that you've done. Where can people get the courses? Where can people get the books? Because you've just recently released 2 books, one on inner bonding and one, I see them on your shelf at the back there, called The Divine Connected. Tell us where we can find them all.
Okay, so people can go to innerbonding.com and you can scroll down. If you scroll down to new offerings, first of all, they can see a new ebook that I'm offering and a webinar that I'm giving numbers of times in the next week and a half. I'll be also giving a course on teaching inner bonding if people are interested in that. All my books are on Amazon. There's many other offerings on our website that will help people to learn inner bonding. So innerbonding.com has a tremendous amount to offer.
Thank you so much for your resources, and thank you so much for being on the Mind, Body, Soul Festival. We really appreciate your time and the effort that you brought and answered some of the pressing questions, which I actually thought was quite hard too. When I was reading them, I was thinking, oh, this is going to be good. But thank you so much for that.
You're very, very welcome. You take care.